learn AI and get with the program, and that there's going to be some hard times and some losses and some difficulties. This techno-optimism is exactly the kind of thing that caused the Titanic to sink. Is AI as dangerous as they say? AI is more dangerous than they say because of the way humans think and the way humans are going to use AI. I have two unique insights to demonstrate this to you. The first one is based upon my background as a lawyer and how AI is going to wipe out large chunks of the legal profession. In fact, it's already making a substantial impact. The second part is I can demonstrate to you how the dangers of AI are very similar to the sinking of the Titanic, which was thought to be the unsinkable ship. At the end, I'm going to explain how the dangers of AI are also connected to the climate crisis. I'm involved with climate on multiple different levels as a strategist, as someone who is operationalizing climate organizations, and as someone with deep experience in 40 years of research in climate. And I can tell you, AI is really going to make a mess of climate. So let's start with how AI is going to impact the legal profession. In fact, just last week, I spoke with the CEO of a tech company, and they made a purchase and merger with another tech company in Europe, and they used AI for the entire process. In other words, they cut out all of the lawyers for the merger and acquisition that they would normally have, which is a very lucrative thing for the legal profession. They cut out the lawyers, they generated the documents themselves, they double and triple checked it with AI, they went back and forth with the company they were purchasing along the process, and in the end, I think maybe they had a lawyer spot check just a couple of things, but fundamentally 95% of the effort that would have been with some big law firm making lots of money was done in-house by a couple of people using AI. And as I said, I have a unique background in law. I practiced law for years, and I've also used lawyers quite a number of times. In fact, when we set up a will and a trust for my father for his estate, we used a lawyer back 20 years ago. Today, if we were to do that today, I would use AI to do that myself and save the probably $3,000 or $4,000 it would take from a law firm today. Here's what's going to happen in 18 months. In 18 months, what you're going to do is you're going to go on to some either specialized narrow AI app that's just for law and probably just for wills and trusts, estates, and taxes. And you're going to tell it what you want. It'll ask you a few questions. And then for $100 instead of $5,000, it'll produce all the documentation you need, tell you how to file it with the state, tell you where to file it, how many copies to make, where to keep them, all the things, set up a timer for you to get the job done, and make sure that everyone's notified that needs to be notified, and ensure that you've done everything correctly, because it will be tracking every new case, every new law, all the implications, all the tax ramifications, and everything else. And you won't need to pay a $500 an hour lawyer. That's what's going to happen. So AI is going to have a massive impact all across the legal profession. And you can take that idea and you can run it out to every single other business application in the white collar industries, right? In the high knowledge based industries. So as you can see with the legal example, there's this tension going on between the benefits that AI can bring and all of the damage it's going to do in the economy and all the challenges and the pressures it puts on people, jobs, businesses, the economy, your well-being, your finances, and everything else. There's this massive tension. And what we keep hearing is this idea that it's not that AI is going to take your job, it's that someone who knows AI is going to take your job. And that's a little disingenuous as far as I'm concerned, because the fact of the matter is AI won't just take your job. Someone with AI will take your job, but they'll also take the job of 1,000 other people working in that organization, right? So we can just get rid of the firm's 50 people in wills and trusts and estates, hire one person who knows law and AI in trusts and estates, and we can get rid of 30 or 40 of the lawyers. And that's what's going to happen. So, last week I was watching a video with Peter Diamandis and AI, and he does this big podcast about it. And he brought on Tony Robbins, and they had this conversation. And again, it felt wonderful, positive, and exciting, but also a little disingenuous, because they're talking about how we have to sort of buck up. We have to sort of learn AI and get with the program, and that there's going to be some hard times and some losses and some difficulties, but we've always found our way through, because look at the 18th century when the Luddites were throwing spanners, pieces of wood into the machines and the looms and everything else. And we made it through, and now we have this big, wonderful industrial society. Well, this techno-optimism is exactly the kind of thing that caused the Titanic to sink, right? So if you look at it, the Titanic was this unsinkable ship. It was this giant, massive, beautiful ship. It was going to make record time across the Atlantic. There were the equivalent of billionaires on board for this magical journey. And what happened? What happened is their techno-optimism made them think that the ship was unsinkable, when in fact the design proved it wasn't. And what was the proof? The iceberg cut a hole in the ship and it sank. Why? because inside the design of the ship, they had made horizontal unsinkableness, but not vertical. And so what happened is the water filled up, went over one bulkhead and another, and all five compartments were filled with water instead of being unsinkable, and the ship sank, and tons of people lost their lives, including a lot of wealthy people who thought they were impenetrably safe in this wonderful new modern ship. And that's what we're doing with AI. Many people are out there saying AI optimism is not overblown. We're going to build trillions of dollars worth of these data centers and AI. We're focusing only on this area now in the US, as it's 90% of our massive infrastructure investment right now. And we're putting all of our chips down on whatever, 38 black on the roulette table. And the fact of the matter is that this is a wild danger for you, for your economics, for your livelihood, for your wealth, for your quality of life and your well-being, and for business all around the world. And it's also a huge challenge for the economy. And when it's charged for the economy, you're going to see them blowing smoke up your kilt, if you will, to make you think that it's going to be good for you until you realize it's not. So while the Titanic is a great example of like the failure of techno-optimism and sort of our blind spots that we have and the blinders that we have on about the benefits of technology and the perfection of technology and its wonderful, beautiful impact in our life, AI has a lot of vulnerabilities. The way we use it, the way we think about it, the way we're going to rely on it to solve all these problems. And in fact, part of the challenge is that we have things that we think are problems, but they're not. They're predicaments. So the minute the carving of the ice came across the Titanic and made a gouge in the side and opened it up, and the water started pouring in, at that moment, the ship was lost. They didn't think it was. They thought their techno-optimism that the way the ship was designed would save them, but it's not true. They relied on something that wasn't true because they wanted to believe it would be true. In the same way, all these people are saying that AI is going to save the economy. It's going to save technology. It's going to have all these wonderful, miraculous things that it's going to do. It's going to create so many jobs you won't believe it. When in fact, that techno-optimism is wrong. And we know it's going to go through the economy. We know it's going to batter and destroy industry after industry in terms of the number of jobs. It'll make them more profitable, make them more wealthy, it'll make them more powerful, it'll make their owners more wealthy and powerful. But for us, the average person watching this video and the friends that you share this with, they're going to go, oh my gosh, it's not going to happen that way. Now I get it. Now I'm worried, right? And that doesn't even talk about the environmental impacts of the heat, the water usage, the resource usage, the usage of capital that's going to suck all the opportunity out of the economy just to generate this AI because it's going to be this wonderful super machine from God almost that's going to save humanity. And here's another example, and this is probably the more important one. When you think about climate right now, we are in climate and ecological free fall. Heating is accelerating, the impacts are accelerating, and the impacts likely are even more dangerous. In fact, a lot of scientists are now saying that we could heat 3 degrees Celsius by 2050. And so that means the end of agriculture. That means billions of people migrating. That means a ton of other problems that will likely cause the collapse of much of what we think of as modern civilization. Here's the thing. We're doing that same techno-optimist viewpoint, blinders on, close the eyes, close the ears, la, 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 with climate that we're doing with the impacts that are coming from AI, just like the people that built the Titanic. In fact, the wealthy on the Titanic thought they were going to be fine at first, and they started playing music and having cocktails. That's kind of what we're doing. We're dancing in celebration of AI when we're not really looking at the impact. And most of the people who are in AI right now think it's going to solve the climate crisis. But the problem is we don't have a climate crisis. We have a climate predicament. The minute the iceberg gouged the side of the Titanic, it was already sunk. That's a predicament because they can't change it the minute it happens. They could have problems like how many lifeboats do we have, how many life preservers, how cold is the water. Those are problems to deal with and solve and manage after the carving of the ship, but it's a predicament that caused a series of problems that they had to respond to, but they couldn't change the fact that the ship was going to sink. It's the same way with climate. We're now in a place where they think they're going to use AI to solve climate and we'll come up with all these solutions. But the physics of climate collapse and global heating are such that we're in a predicament with huge amount of momentum we can't change. The carving of the side of our climate ship has already happened, and now we have to respond to it. And this techno-optimism says, we're going to go ahead and build these wonderful, amazing machines that will suck carbon out of the air and solve everything. So we can keep polluting and we can keep adding CO2 and rising the amount of greenhouse gas and warming on the planet. And then at some point, we'll just shift a little bit and then we'll make all these magical machines that will suck carbon out of the air. Well, that's that magical thinking of thinking that we have a problem rather than a predicament. And we're not going to have some deus ex machina, some God machine come down and do all this for us. In fact, the oil companies are planning on being the ones to do that and charging you trillions and trillions of dollars to solve the problem they're creating by burning fossil fuels and stopping us from transitioning to a different kind of economy, a different kind of energy sources. So I want you to think of this in the big picture. We've got AI. We've got all the businesses that are going to be impacted. We've got this belief that it's going to solve all the problems, and blinders on and not recognizing the large predicaments, both in the economy, in jobs, in well-being, in power and economics around the world, and the disruption that's going to cause. And it's exactly paired with and partnered with the silent, almost like the silent heart attack that someone has, like the guy dies at 50 from a sudden heart attack. That's what's happening with climate. People are going to say, what happened? How did this get so far? It's because we think of climate as a problem and not as a predicament. And because of that, we think we can solve it magically with AI and other resources, and we can't. We got to get smart. We have to get informed. We have to get educated. That's why I make these videos for you, so you can understand AI is a much bigger problem than you think it is. It's going to have a much larger impact on the economy. It is the gouge across the side of our economic Titanic. It is, for the modern civilization, an epic moment where, if properly used and utilized, can benefit all of humanity. However, if continued process and usage and planning for AI goes on, it's going to be to the detriment of almost every single modern economy in the world, to your retirement, to your economics, your ability to get food, and all those things. And it's going to distract us by not treating climate as a predicament. It's going to distract us into thinking it's a problem we can solve later, and we can't. So my feeling is this: get smarter, get involved, get more educated, watch these videos I make for you, because I'm desiring to help you really understand what's going on so you can make better decisions. Because if we're not properly informed, we can't make the right decisions. Isn't that so? Anyway, thanks for watching today. Like, subscribe, share. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Think about this stuff because it's really important.